The morning rush at Harper's Diner moved like clockwork until an old man in a worn denim jacket walked through the door and left exactly $5 on the table. Amara Lewis had no idea she was being tested or that her answer would set off a chain reaction, tearing her small town apart and putting her at war with a billionaire's son. She didn't know that this stranger had been searching for something he thought had died with his wife, or that her simple act of kindness would make her the target of accusations, fraud charges, and a battle for a $2 billion inheritance she never asked for. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is show kindness to the wrong person, and Amara was about to learn that when you pass a test you didn't know you were taking, the real challenge is surviving what comes after. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning sun barely broke through the clouds when Amara Lewis pushed open the door to Harper's Diner. Her sneakers squeaked against the black and white checkered floor as she tied her apron behind her back. The clock on the wall read 5:30, and already she could hear Mrs. Harper clanging pots in the kitchen. Amara took a deep breath, rolling her shoulders back. Another double shift ahead. Another day of smiling through exhaustion. She moved through the morning routine with practiced ease. Fill the coffee pots. Check the sugar dispensers. Wipe down the counter. The diner smelled like bacon grease and fresh bread, a comfort that had become as familiar as home. By 6 o'clock, the first customers trickled in. Old Mr. Patterson with his newspaper. The construction crew heading to the new development site. Betty from the post office, who always ordered decaf with 2 creams. Amara remembered them all. Not just their orders, but the little details that made them feel seen. Mr. Patterson liked his eggs over easy, but only on Mondays and Wednesdays. On Tuesdays, he wanted them scrambled because that's what his late wife used to make. Betty was watching her cholesterol, so Amara would quietly swap out the regular bacon for turkey bacon without making a fuss about it. The construction crew always split 1 order of hash browns between 3 guys to save money, so Amara made sure the portion was a little bigger than usual. "You're too good for this place," Betty whispered one morning as Amara refilled her coffee. "You should be running a restaurant, not waiting tables in one." Amara just smiled. "This place is exactly where I need to be." She meant it. The diner wasn't just a job. It was community. It was the place where people celebrated birthdays with free slices of pie, where teenagers came after prom to sober up before driving home, where lonely widowers found company over a cup of coffee. Amara had grown up in these booths, watching her mother wait these same tables before cancer took her 3 years ago. Around 8 in the morning, the door chimed. Amara glanced up from pouring coffee and saw a man she didn't recognize. He looked like he'd walked straight out of country song. Worn denim jacket with frayed cuffs. Faded jeans with honest dirt on the knees. A fedora that had seen better decades, pulled low over his eyes. He moved slowly, like his joints ached, and chose the corner booth near the window. Most waitresses would have called him honey or sugar, the way they did with everyone. But something about the way he sat, shoulders curved inward like he was trying to take up less space in the world, made Amara pause. She approached with a menu and a smile. "Good morning, sir. Can I start you off with some coffee?" The man looked up, and Amara caught a glimpse of his eyes. They were blue, pale like winter sky, and they carried something heavy. Not meanness, not anger, just a deep, aching loneliness that made Amara's heart squeeze. "Coffee will be fine," he said quietly. His voice was rough but polite. Amara brought the pot over and poured carefully. "It's a bit chilly this morning. Are you warm enough? I can grab you a seat closer to the heater if you'd like." The man blinked, as if surprised by the question. "No, I'm fine here. Thank you. Take your time with the menu. I'll check back in a few minutes." Amara started to turn away, then paused. "Actually, let me bring you a fresh cup. That pot's been sitting a bit too long." She returned with a steaming mug from the newly brewed batch. The man watched her set it down, studying her face like he was trying to memorize it. "Thank you," he said again, softer this time. The man ordered simple. 2 eggs, wheat toast, and a side of fruit instead of hash browns. Amara brought it out herself, making sure the eggs were cooked exactly right. As she set the plate down, she noticed his hands. They were weathered and scarred, the hands of someone who'd worked hard for a long time. But there was something else. The way he held his fork, the way he sat, there was a refinement underneath the rough exterior, like a king pretending to be a peasant. Throughout the morning rush, Amara kept an eye on him, not because she was suspicious, but because he seemed so alone. He ate slowly, looking out the window at the small town waking up. When other customers got loud, he flinched slightly, like he'd forgotten what noise sounded like. During her break, Amara stepped out back to call her sister. Naomi answered on the third ring, sounding rushed. "Hey, I can't talk long. I've got a shift at the hospital in 20 minutes. "I know. I just wanted to check in. Did you get any sleep?" "A few hours." Naomi sighed. "Amara, we got another letter from the county. About Mama's house." Amara's stomach dropped. "How much time do we have?" 30 days. The property taxes are 6 months overdue. If we don't come up with $3,200, they're going to start foreclosure proceedings." Amara leaned against the brick wall, closing her eyes. $3,200 might as well have been $32,000. Between her wages and Naomi's part-time hospital work while she studied nursing, they barely covered rent, utilities, and groceries. Their mother's house, the house they grew up in, was slipping through their fingers like water. "We'll figure it out," Amara said, forcing strength into her voice. "We always do." "How?" "We're already working every hour we can." "I don't know yet, but we will. Trust me." After she hung up, Amara let herself stand there for one more minute. Just 1 minute to feel the weight of it all. Then she straightened her shoulders, fixed her smile, and walked back inside. The old man was still there, finishing his coffee. Amara cleared his plate and left the check. He paid in cash, counting out exact bills from a worn leather wallet. As Amara collected the money, she noticed he'd left $5 on the table. $5. For a $9 meal, it was a decent tip. Not extravagant, but thoughtful. She picked up the bill and walked it to the register. Mrs. Harper was there, reconciling the morning receipts. The older woman looked tired. The diner had been struggling lately. Fewer customers, higher costs, equipment breaking down. Amara knew Mrs. Harper lay awake at night, worrying about keeping the doors open. Amara held up the $5. "Mrs. Harper, can you add this to the community jar?" Mrs. Harper looked up, surprised. "Honey, that's your tip." "I know, but I'm just grateful he ate well today. Use it to cover someone who can't pay next time." Mrs. Harper's eyes softened. She took the bill and tucked it into a small glass jar they kept behind the counter. The jar was labeled in faded marker, "Someone else's meal." It was Amara's idea, started 6 months ago. Whenever someone couldn't afford their breakfast, Mrs. Harper would quietly cover it from the jar. Most of the money in there came from Amara's own tips. "You got a heart too big for this world," Mrs. Harper murmured. "Mama used to say you never lose by giving." Outside, the old man sat in a beat-up pickup truck. He hadn't started the engine yet. Through the diner window, he'd watched the entire interaction. Watched Amara hand over the tip without hesitation. Watched her smile at Mrs. Harper like she'd done something simple and obvious. Walter Kensington gripped the steering wheel, his hand shaking slightly. He'd been testing people for months, traveling to different towns, leaving tips, watching what people did when they thought no one was looking. Some pocketed the money without a second thought. Some complained it wasn't enough. Others made a show of their generosity, announcing their good deeds for everyone to hear. But this girl, this young woman who looked exhausted and still made sure strangers were warm enough, who remembered coffee preferences and gave away money she clearly needed. She didn't perform kindness. She simply lived it. For the first time in 3 years, since his wife Emma died, Walter smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number he rarely called anymore. "Aldridge," a crisp voice answered. "Walter's lawyer." "Gerald, it's Walter." "Mr. Kensington, are you ready to finalize the revisions to your will?" "Not yet. Delay it. I may have found someone worth speaking to first." "Sir, with all due respect, we've been delaying for months. Your son has been calling repeatedly." "Let him call. I'm not ready yet." Walter hung up and started the truck. As he pulled away from the diner, he glanced in the rearview mirror one more time. Through the window, he could see Amara laughing at something a customer said, her whole face lighting up despite whatever burdens she carried. Finally, Walter whispered to himself. Someone who still understands. Back inside the diner, the lunch rush was beginning. Amara felt the curious stares. Some of the regulars had noticed the old man watching her. Small towns bred gossip like weeds. "Who's your new friend?" Betty asked, eyebrows raised. "Just a customer," Amara replied, refilling water glasses. "He was staring at you an awful lot. Maybe he was just enjoying the view of Main Street." Betty snorted. "Girl, he wasn't looking at Main Street." Even Mrs. Harper pulled Amara aside during a lull. "That man who left the $5. You notice anything strange about him? He seemed lonely." "What?" "I don't know. Something about him felt off. Not dangerous, just different. Be careful, okay?" Amara promised she would, but she didn't feel worried. She'd waited on thousands of customers over the years. She developed a sixth sense for trouble, and that old man wasn't it. If anything, he seemed like someone who needed kindness more than most. That evening, Naomi came by the diner after her hospital shift. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't hide. Amara made her sit down and brought her a burger and fries on the house. "You're going to get in trouble for giving away food," Naomi said, but she ate anyway. Mrs. Harper doesn't mind. "Eat." Naomi took a bite, then looked at her sister seriously. "I've been thinking about Mama's house. Maybe we should just let it go. Stop killing ourselves trying to hold onto something we can't afford. That's our home. It's a building, Amara. We don't even live there anymore. Mama died in that house. Her garden's still there. Her recipes written on cards in the kitchen drawer. That's not just a building." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. "I know, but what choice do we have?" Amara reached across the table and squeezed her sister's hand. 30 days. We've got 30 days. Something will work out. It has to." But privately, alone in her small apartment that night, Amara wasn't so sure. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, doing math in her head that wouldn't add up no matter how many times she tried. Even if she picked up extra shifts, even if Naomi did the same, they'd still come up short. And that wasn't counting Naomi's own expenses, the books and fees for nursing school that kept climbing. Amara thought about her dream, the one she barely let herself acknowledge anymore. She wanted to open a cafe. Not a fancy place, but somewhere warm and safe where kids could come after school. Where the meal was free if you couldn't pay, and no child ever felt ashamed about being hungry. She'd been sketching floor plans in a notebook for 2 years, saving every spare penny in a shoebox under her bed. Last time she counted, there was almost $400 there. It had taken so long to save that much. But $400 wouldn't save her mother's house. And if they lost the house, the dream of the cafe would stay just that, a dream. She finally fell asleep with tears on her cheeks. The next morning, Amara arrived at the diner to find the old man already there, sitting in the same corner booth. He looked up when she walked in and gave a small nod, almost like he'd been waiting. "Good morning, sir," Amara said, grabbing the coffee pot. "You're here early. Couldn't sleep. Figured good company and good coffee might help." Amara poured his cup, noticing he looked even more tired than yesterday. "Rough night. You could say that. Getting old isn't for the weak." "Well, you came to the right place." Mrs. Harper's coffee could wake the dead. That earned her a chuckle. It was a small sound, rusty like he didn't laugh often, but genuine. Over the next hour, as Amara moved between tables, she noticed the old man watching her again. Not in a creepy way, more like he was studying something he couldn't quite figure out. During a brief lull, he called her over. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Yesterday, the tip I left. I saw what you did with it." "What?" Amara wasn't sure what to say. Nobody had ever questioned her kindness before. "Because someone else needed it more than me." "But you need it too. I can tell." There was something in his voice. Not pity, but understanding. Like he saw past the smile she wore and recognized the weight underneath. "My mama used to say, 'You never lose by giving,'" Amara replied softly. "I guess I'm proving her right. Or trying to anyway." The old man studied her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a $5 bill, placing it on the table. "What if I said I'm testing that theory?" "Then I'd say it's a good theory to test." Amara picked up his empty plate and walked away, leaving the $5 where it was. Later, when she cleared the table, she added it to the jar behind the counter. Through the window, she saw the old man sitting in his truck again, and this time she caught him wiping his eyes. That afternoon, during her break, the old man was still there. He'd ordered lunch, barely eaten it, and seemed content just to sit. Amara, exhausted from the morning rush, sank into the booth across from him before she realized what she was doing. "Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not," he said. "Please sit." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then the old man spoke. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Amara said, and meant it. "We were married 46 years. Had 2 children. Built a good life." He paused, staring into his cold coffee. But somewhere along the way, the children forgot what good means. They know the price of everything and the value of nothing. "That must be lonely." "It is. I've got more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and I'd trade it all for one more conversation with Emma. My wife. She used to tell me that wealth was measured in how many people would miss you when you're gone, not how much you left behind." Amara felt a lump in her throat. "She sounds like she was special. She was a lot like you, actually. Always thinking about others. Always giving. I didn't appreciate it enough when I had it." He looked at Amara directly. "Don't let the world make you hard." "It'll try." "I won't," Amara promised. When she stood to go back to work, the old man caught her wrist gently. "What's your name?" "Amara. Amara Lewis." "I'm Walter." "Just Walter." They shook hands, and Amara felt calluses on his palm. Whatever money he claimed to have, he'd earned it with his hands at some point. That evening, Mrs. Harper asked Amara to stay late. The fryer was acting up again, and they needed to prep for tomorrow. Amara agreed, even though her feet ached and her back hurt. As she chopped vegetables in the quiet kitchen, Mrs. Harper finally spoke what had been weighing on her mind. "I need to tell you something, and I need you not to panic." Amara's hand stilled. "What's wrong?" "The landlord raised the rent. Again. 15% this time." Mrs. Harper's voice cracked. "I don't know if I can keep the diner open." "What?" "No. Mrs. Harper, this place is everything to this town." "I know, baby, but the numbers don't lie. Between the new rent, the broken equipment, and fewer customers, I'm drowning. I've got maybe 3 months before I have to close the doors." Amara set down the knife and hugged the older woman. Mrs. Harper had given Amara's mother a job when nobody else would, had kept Amara on when she was just 16 and desperate to help pay bills. This diner was family. "We'll figure something out," Amara said. "You sound like your mama." She used to say that too. But later, driving home in her old car that needed new brakes she couldn't afford, Amara felt the walls closing in. The house was going to be foreclosed. The diner was failing. Naomi was drowning in school expenses. And Amara's dream cafe seemed more impossible every day. The next morning, Walter was there again. 3rd day in a row. This time, after he finished his breakfast, he left a $5 bill and something else. A crumpled lottery ticket. Amara picked it up, curious. She checked the numbers against the winning numbers posted by the register. It was a winner. $20. Not life-changing, but not nothing either. She could have kept it, could have added it to her desperate savings. Instead, she walked to the register, cashed the ticket, and put all $25 in the community jar. Outside, Walter saw everything. He pressed his forehead against the steering wheel and cried. Really cried, for the first time since Emma's funeral. Because he'd found it. The kindness he thought had died with his wife. The goodness he thought the world had squeezed out of people. Inside the diner, Naomi showed up unexpectedly. She looked pale, and when Amara rushed over, Naomi thrust a stack of papers at her. "What are these?" "Medical bills. From when I passed out at work last month." Amara's hands trembled as she looked at the total. $1,800. Insurance had covered some, but not enough. "Naomi, why didn't you tell me?" "Because you're already drowning. I thought I could handle it, but they're threatening to send it to collections. And if that happens, my credit is ruined, and I can lose my nursing school scholarship." Amara pulled her sister close, and they stood there in the middle of the diner, 2 young women holding each other against a world that kept demanding more than they had to give. Walter, still sitting in his truck, saw this too. He didn't know the details, but he recognized desperation when he saw it. That night, he made a phone call to a community assistance fund he quietly supported. He arranged for an anonymous donation to cover property taxes for families in need in that county. It was the least he could do. But when Amara found out days later that her mother's house taxes had been mysteriously paid through a community fund, she grew suspicious. She asked questions, found out the donation came from a foundation connected to Kensington Industries. She looked up Kensington Industries, found photos of Walter Kensington, billionaire industrialist. Then she compared those photos to the old man in the fedora sitting in his truck outside. Her heart sank. The next time Walter came in, Amara brought his coffee, but set it down harder than usual. "I know who you are." Walter's expression didn't change. "I figured you'd find out eventually. Did you pay our property taxes? A foundation I support helps families in need. I didn't target you specifically. Don't lie to me." Amara's voice shook. "You've been watching me for days, testing me, and now you're trying to fix my life without asking." "I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was trying to help others like me, people you don't know. But don't help me because you pity me. I'm not a project." Walter stood, looking older and more tired than ever. "I don't pity you. I admire you. There's a difference." "Is there? Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you think I can't take care of myself." "That's not what I think at all." Amara turned away, tears burning her eyes. "I need you to leave." Walter nodded slowly. "All right. But Amara, for what it's worth, you're the first person in 3 years who's made me believe kindness still matters. I'll leave you alone. But thank you for reminding me why my Emma loved people so much." He left $40 on the table and walked out. Amara stood there, shaking, feeling like she'd made a terrible mistake and the right choice all at once. That night, Amara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Walter's face when she told him to leave. The sadness there, the resignation. She thought about how lonely he must be with all that money and nobody who cared about him for the right reasons. And she thought about what her mother would say. Mama never turned away someone who needed kindness, no matter how complicated it was to give it. The next day, when Walter didn't come to the diner, Amara felt his absence like a missing tooth. She kept glancing at the corner booth, expecting to see him there. During her break, she sat in that booth herself, trying to understand. Pastor Jonah Gray came in for lunch and found her there, staring out the window. "Something on your mind, child?" Amara told him everything. About Walter, the test, the money, the argument. Pastor Jonah listened without interrupting, the way he always did. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "You know, I knew a woman once who had a gift for seeing people's hearts. She married a man who had everything except peace. She taught him that real wealth was measured in love given, not dollars earned." He smiled sadly. Her name was Emma Kensington. Amara's breath caught. "You knew Walter's wife?" "Knew of her. She used to come to our church sometimes, back when they lived in Millbrook, about 30 miles from here, before they moved to the city. She was the kindest woman I ever met. And when she died, I heard her husband lost his way. You think he's looking for her? In me, I think he's looking for hope. And maybe you remind him that it still exists." That evening, as Amara was closing up, she heard the rumble of an old truck engine. Walter was just sitting there, hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Amara grabbed 2 cups of coffee and walked outside. She tapped on his window. Walter looked up, surprised. "I'm sorry," Amara said, "for what I said. You were just trying to be kind." "No, you were right. I should have asked first." "Maybe, but I should have said thank you first." She handed him the coffee. "Can we start over?" Walter took the cup, hands shaking. "I like that very much." They sat in his truck, drinking coffee as the sun set. Walter finally spoke. "Amara, if you could do anything in the world, money no object, what would you do?" Amara smiled. "I'd open a cafe, a place where kids could come after school and get a meal for free, where nobody feels ashamed about being hungry." Walter listened, and when she finished, he just nodded. "Your wife would have loved that idea, wouldn't she?" Amara asked softly. "She would have loved you," Walter replied, his voice thick. "You remind me so much of her. Emma used to say the same thing you said. You never lose by giving." They finished their coffee in silence. "Amara, I need you to know something. I'm not going to be around much longer. My heart's giving out. Doctors give me 6 months, maybe less. And I've spent the last 3 years looking for something I thought died with Emma. You showed me it didn't. Thank you for that. Amara's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. Then we better make these 6 months count. Walter smiled back, and it reached his eyes. Yes, we better. As Walter drove away that night, he pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. Gerald, it's Walter. I need you to prepare preliminary documents. A trust for community programs focused on feeding children. Sir, you're talking about a substantial undertaking. I've spent 3 years testing the world, Gerald, leaving tips in diners across 12 states. Most failed, but this woman doesn't even realize she's being tested. She's just being herself. Walter's voice grew firm. I trust her more than I trust my own son. Back in her apartment, Amara lay awake thinking about the conversation. 6 months. Walter had 6 months, and he'd spent time watching her pour coffee. What did that say about his loneliness? Naomi came in without knocking. That old man who's been coming to the diner. He's dying. Amara sat up, and he's got all the money in the world, but nobody who cares except for what they'll get when he's gone. Naomi sat on the bed. That's sad. It's wrong. He's a good man. So lonely he has to test strangers just to find kindness. Is that what he was doing? Yeah, and I passed. But it doesn't feel like winning. It feels like the world failed him. Naomi was quiet. You're going to help him, aren't you? He deserves a friend. A real one. That's dangerous, getting close to someone who's dying. Maybe, but what's more dangerous is never taking the risk. That night, Amara made a decision. For however long Walter had left, she'd show him the kindness he'd been searching for. The next morning, Walter returned to the diner. When Amara poured his coffee, she sat down across from him. Tell me about Emma. Walter's eyes lit up. As he talked about his late wife, Amara listened. Really listened. In that corner booth, over coffee that grew cold, something shifted. Walter began to believe goodness still existed. And Amara understood that her capacity for kindness might be her most valuable gift. Neither knew it yet, but that morning marked the beginning of something that would change both their lives forever. The connection between Walter and Amara had grown deeper over the past week. Walter came to the diner every morning, and they'd talk for hours when the rush slowed down. He told her stories about Emma, about building his company from nothing, about the mistakes he'd made raising his children. Amara listened without judgment, offering the kind of warmth Walter had forgotten existed in the world. But across the country, in a glass tower office overlooking the city, Elias Kensington was losing patience. He stood at his window, phone pressed to his ear, listening to his father's lawyer make excuses again. Gerald Aldridge's voice was calm, professional, and infuriating. Your father has made it clear he's not ready to finalize the will revisions. I'm simply following his instructions. My father is 78 years old with a failing heart, Elias said through clenched teeth. He's not thinking clearly. That's why I need to know where he is and what he's doing. I'm not at liberty to discuss your father's location or activities. Elias hung up and threw his phone onto his mahogany desk. His father had been gone for over a month, hiding in some small town, dodging calls, and now delaying the will that should have been settled years ago. Something was wrong, and Elias didn't trust anyone except himself to fix it. He picked up his office phone and dialed a number he kept for situations that require discretion. I need someone found, Elias said when the voice answered. Walter Kensington. My father. I want to know where he is, who he's talking to, and what he's doing. And I want photographs. 3 days later, a nondescript man in khaki pants and a button-down shirt walked into Harper's diner. He ordered coffee and eggs, sat in the middle booth, and took out his phone. To anyone watching, he looked like a businessman killing time. But his camera was aimed at the corner booth where Walter and Amara sat deep in conversation. Click, click, click. The investigator captured Walter leaning forward, his face animated as he spoke. Amara laughing, her hand briefly touching Walter's arm. The two of them looking at something on Amara's phone, their heads close together. The investigator paid his bill, left a mediocre tip, and walked out. By that evening, the photos were in Elias's inbox. Elias stared at the images on his computer screen. His father, the man who'd built an empire on cold calculation and shrewd decisions, was sitting in a rundown diner, smiling at a young black woman in a waitress uniform. And the way his father was looking at her, There was a tenderness Elias hadn't seen in years. Not since his mother died. Who the hell is she? Elias muttered. He clicked through the photos until he found one where Amara's name tag was visible. Then he started digging. Within an hour, he knew her full name, her address, her employment history, and her financial situation. Single, working class, drowning in debt. No criminal record, no significant assets. Nothing that explained why his father would waste time on her. Unless she was manipulating him. Elias's jaw tightened. He'd seen this before. People smelling money and circling like vultures. His father was old, lonely, and vulnerable. The perfect target. This girl probably thought she'd found her golden ticket. He booked a flight for the next day. Back at the diner, Walter asked Amara a question that had been on his mind. If you could do anything, truly anything, what would your cafe look like? Amara's eyes lit up. She pulled out a worn notebook from her apron pocket, the pages filled with sketches and notes. She'd been planning this dream for so long, it had become like a friend she visited in quiet moments. It would be small, she said, flipping to a page with a floor plan drawn in pencil. Maybe 20 tables. Bright yellow walls, because yellow makes people happy. A big chalkboard menu that changes based on what we have fresh. And a corner with books and board games for kids to use while they eat. Walter studied the drawings. They were detailed, thoughtful. This wasn't a fantasy. This was a blueprint waiting for resources. How much would something like this cost to start? I've been researching. With used equipment and a small lease, maybe $70,000 to get the doors open. Another $20,000 for operating costs the first few months. Amara closed the notebook. It's a lot of money I don't have, but I keep planning anyway. Mama used to say dreams are free, so dream big. Walter nodded slowly. Your mama was a wise woman. What Amara didn't know was that Walter had already instructed Gerald to draft documents for a community feeding program. And at the center of those documents was a provision for a cafe run by someone with proven compassion. Someone named Amara Lewis. But Walter wanted her to know why. He wanted her to understand that this wasn't charity or pity. It was recognition, an inheritance earned not through blood, but through character. Amara, there's something I need to tell you. Before he could continue, Pastor Jonah walked into the diner. He spotted Walter and stopped mid-stride, his expression shifting from casual to intense recognition. He approached the booth slowly. Walter Kensington, Pastor Jonah said quietly. I thought I recognized you. Walter looked up, surprised. Do we know each other? Not directly, but I knew your wife. Emma used to come to my church in Millbrook, back before you moved to the city. She was one of the kindest souls I ever met. Walter's eyes misted over. You knew Emma? I did. And when she passed, I grieved for her. I also worried about you. Pastor Jonah slid into the booth next to Amara. Emma used to tell me she feared the Kensington wealth would steal the kindness from your children. She wanted them to understand that money was a tool, not a trophy. Walter's voice cracked. She tried. I didn't listen well enough. Pastor Jonah looked at Amara, then back at Walter. But you're listening now, aren't you? I see you with this young woman. I see the way you look at her, like you're seeing Emma's heart all over again. Amara felt a lump in her throat. Walter, what is Pastor Jonah talking about? Walter took a deep breath. I've been testing you, Amara. I told you that. But what I didn't tell you is why. I'm dying, and I'm very wealthy. My children care more about my money than they ever cared about me. So I've been looking for someone who understands what Emma understood. That real wealth is measured in kindness, not dollars. Amara's hand shook. Why me? Because every time I tested you, you chose people over profit. You gave away tips you needed. You chased a customer down in the rain to return a wallet. You worked double shifts to keep a diner alive because it matters to your community. Walter reached across the table and took her hand. You're who Emma would want me to remember. Who she'd want me to honor. Before Amara could respond, the diner door burst open. A man in an expensive suit strode in, his shoes clicking sharply against the floor. He looked around with barely concealed disgust until his eyes landed on Walter. There you are, Elias said coldly. Walter's expression hardened. Elias, what are you doing here? Coming to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. Elias walked to the booth, his eyes flicking dismissively over Amara. Get up. We're leaving. I'm not going anywhere. Elias's voice rose. Dad, you're sick. You're not thinking clearly. And this woman is taking advantage of you. Amara stood up, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I don't know who you think I am, but I've never asked your father for anything. You don't have to ask. You just have to be here, playing the grateful waitress, waiting for him to hand you a fortune. Elias turned to the diner patrons who were now watching the scene unfold. You're all witnessing elder abuse. This woman has manipulated my father. The words hung in the air like poison. Walter struggled his feet, his face red. That's enough. Amara has shown me more genuine care in 2 weeks than you've shown me in 20 years. Because she wants your money. No, Walter said firmly. Because she doesn't know how much I have. Because she sees me as a person, not a bank account. Something you never learned to do. Amara stepped between them, her hand raised. Stop. Both of you. She looked at Elias. You're his son. You should be making sure he's happy and healthy, not accusing strangers. Whatever you think is happening here, you're wrong. Your father has been kind to me, and I've been kind back. That's all. Elias's laugh was bitter. You expect me to believe that? I don't expect anything from you. But I know what I am, and I know what I'm not. And I'm not a liar. Amara's voice didn't waver. If kindness looks like gold to you, then I'm richer than you'll ever be. Several customers clapped. Someone called out, You tell him, Amara. Elias's face flushed with humiliation and rage. He looked around the diner, seeing the hostile faces, and then back at his father. This isn't over, he said quietly. I'm going to prove she's using you. And when I do, you'll see I was right. He stormed out, the door slamming behind him. The diner erupted in murmurs. Walter sank back into the booth, suddenly looking much older. Amara sat beside him, taking his hand. I am sorry, Walter whispered. I never meant for you to be dragged into this. It's not your fault. But Walter, what did he mean about proving something? Pastor Jonah's expression was grave. Men like Elias don't make empty threats. He'll dig into your life, Amara. He'll look for anything he can use against you. That night, Walter sat in his motel room and called Gerald Aldridge. I need you to accelerate the will revisions. I want them finalized within 48 hours. Sir, that's incredibly fast. Are you sure? My son just proved why I'm doing this. I need to protect Amara and make sure my wishes are honored before Elias can interfere. What exactly do you want the new will to include? Walter spoke for 30 minutes, outlining his vision. Community funds for struggling towns. Medical scholarships in Emma's name. The diner's mortgage paid off. And at the center, a trust for Amara's cafe, with one condition. She had a promise to feed children for free, forever. No profit motive, just kindness. And Elias? Gerald asked carefully. He gets enough to live comfortably, but not enough to be careless with other people's lives. When Walter hung up, he looked at a photo of Emma he kept on the nightstand. I'm doing what you would have wanted, Emma. I'm choosing kindness over blood. I hope I'm not too late. The next morning, the town newspaper ran a story that sent shockwaves through the community. The headline read, Local waitress set to inherit billionaire's fortune. The article was short on facts and long on speculation, but it named Amara, mentioned Walter's terminal illness, and questioned whether undue influence was at play. The article included quotes from anonymous sources claiming Amara had been seen spending excessive time with Walter. It suggested she'd isolated him from his family, manipulated his emotions during a vulnerable time, and positioned herself to benefit from his wealth. The source was anonymous, but everyone knew who'd planted the story. Amara arrived at the diner to find people staring. Some offered supportive smiles. Others whispered behind their hands, their eyes following her movements with suspicion and judgment. One customer she'd served for years wouldn't make eye contact. Another moved tables when she approached. Mrs. Harper pulled her aside immediately, her face lined with worry. Honey, are you okay? I saw the paper this morning. Half the town's been calling asking if it's true. I didn't ask for any of this, Amara said, fighting tears. I just wanted to be kind to a lonely old man. That's all it ever was. I know that. Anyone who really knows you knows that. But not everyone does, and people love to assume the worst. Throughout her shift, Amara felt the weight of judgment. A regular customer made a snide comment about getting lucky. Another asked if she was gold digging or just opportunistic. Each comment was a small cut, and by lunchtime, Amara was bleeding from 1,000 wounds. She found Walter's number and called during her break. "I think it's best if you don't come around anymore," she said, her voice shaking. "Amada, no. Don't let Elias win. This isn't about winning or losing. It's about my life. I can't have people thinking I'm something I'm not. I can't have this chaos." She wiped her eyes. "I'm grateful for your friendship, but I think you should spend your time with your family, not with me. You are my family, more than my son has been in years. I am sorry, Walter. I really am." She hung up before he could respond. Walter sat in his motel room, holding the silent phone, feeling his heart literally ache in his chest. He'd found something precious and pure, and his own son had poisoned it. The cruelty of it broke something inside him. That night, someone broke into Harper's diner. Mrs. Harper's frantic call woke Amara at 2 in the morning. By the time Amara arrived, police cars were parked outside, their lights painting the street in blue and red. The front windows were smashed, glass scattered across the sidewalk like fallen stars. Inside, tables were overturned, chairs broken, and spray painted across the wall in angry red letters were the words, "Gold Digger." Amara stood in the doorway, too shocked to cry. The place that had been her second home, that had fed her family and her soul, was destroyed. The message was clear. This wasn't about justice or truth. This was about punishment, about making her pay for daring to connect with someone beyond her supposed station. Mrs. Harper wrapped an arm around her shoulders, her own hands shaking. The police think it was vandalism, random teenagers looking for trouble. But Amara knew better. This wasn't random. This was a message. And whoever sent it wanted her to understand that crossing certain lines came with consequences. Pastor Jonah arrived with a bucket and cleaning supplies, his face set with determination. "We'll fix this," he said firmly. "The community will come together. This isn't who we are." And they did. By dawn, volunteers showed up with plywood, paint, and determination. They covered the broken windows, scrubbed the walls, and by noon, the diner looked almost normal. But Amara couldn't shake the feeling that something had fundamentally shifted. The town was divided now. Some believed the newspaper story and viewed her with suspicion. Others defended her fiercely, recognizing the kindness she'd shown for years. And in the middle of it all, Amara just wanted to disappear into the silence and escape judgment. Walter showed up that afternoon despite Amara's request. He looked terrible, pale, and unsteady. Pastor Jonah helped him to a booth. "I heard what happened," Walter said. "Amara, I'm so sorry. You can't keep apologizing for things that aren't your fault. Then let me do something that is in my control. Let me help fix the diner properly. Let me hire security. Let me—" "No." Amara's voice was firm. "Don't you see? Every time you try to help, it makes things worse. People think you're buying me. They think I'm using you. And maybe they're right to be suspicious. Maybe this whole thing is wrong. The only thing wrong is people judging kindness as manipulation." Before Amara could respond, Elias walked in with a woman in a blazer carrying a briefcase. She introduced herself as Elias's attorney. "We're here to present evidence that my client's father is being unduly influenced," the attorney said, pulling out photographs. They showed Walter and Amara talking, laughing, holding hands across the table. Innocent moments made to look calculated. "We also have financial records showing Miss Lewis is in significant debt. Property taxes, medical bills for her sister, all of which creates motive." Amara stared at the photos, feeling violated. "You've been spying on us?" "Protecting my father," Elias corrected. "And now we have enough to pursue a competency hearing." "Dad, you're going to be evaluated by a medical professional to determine if you're mentally sound enough to make legal decisions." Walter's hands trembled with rage. "I'm dying, not demented. And I know exactly what I'm doing." "Do you?" "Because from where I'm standing, you're about to give millions to a stranger while your actual family gets nothing. You'll get what you deserve, Elias, which is less than you think and more than you've earned." The attorney handed Pastor Jonah a stack of papers. These are notifications of intent to challenge any will revisions made in the last 6 months. We'll see you in court. They left, and the diner fell into stunned silence. Amara felt her world collapsing. This wasn't just about her anymore. This was about Walter's final wishes, his legacy, his dignity. And she was caught in the middle of a war she never asked to fight. "I need to go home," she said quietly. "Amara, wait," Walter called out, but she was already gone. That evening, Naomi came home to find Amara sitting in the dark. "I heard what happened at the diner. Are you okay?" "No, I'm really not." Amara looked at her sister. "Naomi, there's something I haven't told you. Walter wants to leave me money. A lot of money. For the cafe. For your medical bills. For everything." Naomi sat down slowly. "How much money?" "I don't know exactly, but enough that his son is willing to destroy me to prevent it." "What are you going to do?" "I don't know. If I walk away, Walter loses. His son wins, and everything Walter wanted gets ignored. But if I stay, I look like exactly what they're accusing me of being." Naomi took her sister's hand. "You've never cared what people think when you know you're doing right. Why start now? Because this is different. This is bigger than me. Maybe that's exactly why you can't walk away." Later that night, Amara's phone rang. It was Mrs. Harper, her voice strained. "Amara, honey, I need to tell you something. Elias came by the diner after you left. He offered to buy the building and pay off all my debts. That's good, right? On one condition, that I fire you." Amara's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "I told him to go to hell. But Amara, he wasn't bluffing. He said if I don't fire you, he'll buy the building anyway and shut us down. Evict us. I've got 30 days to decide. Mrs. Harper, you can't lose the diner because of me. If you need to let me go, child, I'd rather lose the diner than lose my soul. You hear me? This place is bricks and mortar. Your family." Amara hung up and broke down completely. Everything was falling apart, and she didn't know how to stop it. The next morning, Amara went to the hospital where Naomi worked. She needed to see her sister, needed to feel grounded. But when she arrived at the nurse's station, Naomi wasn't there. She collapsed during her shift, a nurse told Amara. "We've got her in the ER." Amara's world tilted. She ran down the hallway, finding Naomi on a gurney, pale and hooked up to monitors. "What happened?" Amara demanded. The doctor looked grave. "Exhaustion, dehydration, stress. Her body just gave out. She needs rest, but she also needs proper care. The bills from her previous emergency visit have caused additional stress that's manifested physically." Amara held her sister's hand, feeling helpless. Everything was spiraling. The diner, Walter, and now Naomi. When Naomi woke up, she squeezed Amara's hand weakly. "I'm sorry," Naomi whispered. "For what? This isn't your fault. I should have told you how bad things were. The medical bills, the stress. I just didn't want to burden you more." Amara kissed her sister's forehead. "We're in this together. Always." A nurse came in with paperwork. "Miss Lewis, about the billing for this visit." "I'll figure it out," Amara said, even though she had no idea how. That evening, Walter showed up at the hospital. Someone must have told him because he walked straight to Naomi's room. "I heard what happened," he said to Amara. "Let me help. Please, let me pay the medical bills anonymously. Through the hospital's charity fund. No one will know it came from me." "Walter, I can't keep taking from you." "You're not taking. I'm giving. There's a difference." His eyes were pleading. "Amare, I am dying. I have maybe a few months left, and every day my son makes your life harder. The least I can do is take care of something that's causing you pain." Amara looked at her sister, sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. She thought about pride versus practicality, about how sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness, but wisdom. "Okay," she whispered, but anonymously. "I mean it. You have my word." Walter arranged everything through the hospital's financial aid office. By the next morning, Naomi's bills were marked as covered by charitable assistance. When the billing coordinator told Amara, she felt a weight lift that she hadn't realized was crushing her. But news traveled fast in a small town, and by afternoon, someone had leaked to Elias's investigator that the bills had been paid. It didn't take long to trace the money back to a foundation Walter supported. That evening, Amara got a call from a reporter asking for comment on accusations that she's manipulating a dying billionaire for financial gain. She hung up without answering, but her hands were shaking. She met Walter at the motel where he was staying. When he opened the door, she saw how much the stress was wearing on him. He looked gaunt, his breathing labored. "This has to stop," Amara said. "Walter, you paid Naomi's bills, and somehow Elias found out. He's going to use it against us. I don't care what he uses. I care that your sister is okay. But I care that you're being dragged through hell because of me." Amara's voice broke. "You wanted to spend your last months in peace, and instead you're fighting your own son." Walter sat down heavily on the bed. "Amara, do you know why I kept testing people? Why I traveled to all those diners? To find someone kind. To find someone worth fighting for. Emma used to tell me that the measure of a life well lived is how many people you lift up before you go. I didn't listen when she was alive. I was too busy building an empire, making money, proving I was important." His voice cracked. "But importance fades. Money gets spent. The only thing that lasts is the kindness you leave behind. Walter, you've already given me more than you know. You've reminded me why Emma loved people so much. Why she believed in goodness even when I couldn't see it. You've made my last months mean something." Amara knelt beside him, taking his weathered hands in hers. "Then let's make sure these months count. Let's fight back. Together." Walter looked at her, this young woman who'd shown him more grace than his own children, and he nodded. Together. But as Amara left the motel that night, neither of them knew that Elias was already making his next move. And this one would be devastating. The next morning, Walter woke to chest pains. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He reached for his phone, but it slipped from his fingers. As consciousness faded, his last thought was of Amara's face, bright and kind, reminding him that goodness still existed in the world. The motel manager found him 30 minutes later and called for an ambulance. By the time Amara heard and raced to the hospital, Walter was in the ICU, machines breathing for him. She stood outside his room, watching through the glass as doctors worked. Pastor Jonah arrived, putting a steady hand on her shoulder. "He's going to be okay," Amara whispered, trying to convince herself. But Pastor Jonah's silence told her what she didn't want to hear. Elias arrived an hour later with his attorney. He looked at Walter through the glass, his expression unreadable. Then he turned to Amara. "This is your fault. The stress you caused him, the manipulation. You did this." Amara was too tired to fight. "Believe what you want. The court hearing is still happening. And now that my father can't defend himself, it'll be even easier to prove he wasn't in his right mind. Your father," Amara said quietly, "was the most right-minded person I've ever met. He saw the world clearly, maybe for the first time in his life. And what he saw was that his son cared more about money than about him." Elias flinched, but his expression hardened. "We'll see what the judge thinks." As he walked away, a doctor approached Amara. "Are you Amara Lewis?" "Yes." Mr. Kensington regained consciousness briefly. "He asked for you." Amara's heart leaped. She rushed into the room, ignoring Elias's protests. Walter's eyes were open, unfocused but aware. When he saw her, he tried to smile. "Don't stop giving," Walter whispered, his voice barely audible over the machines. "Promise me, whatever happens, don't stop." "I won't. I promise." "Envelope. Lawyer has it. For you. Don't let them win." His eyes closed again, and the monitors continued their steady beeping. Amara held his hand, feeling the frailty of life in her palm. A nurse touched her shoulder gently. "You should let him rest." Amara nodded, but before she left, she leaned close to Walter's ear. "Thank you for seeing me, for believing in kindness, for everything." She didn't know if he heard her, but she hoped. Wherever his mind had drifted, he knew he was loved, not for his money or his name, but for the man he'd always been underneath the weight of wealth. As Amara walked out of the hospital into the cold night air, she realized that everything was about to change. Walter's words echoed in her mind. Envelope. Lawyer has it. Whatever happened next, whatever Elias threw at her, she'd made a promise. And Amara Lewis didn't break promises. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. Walter remained in the ICU for 3 days. The machines kept him breathing, kept his heart pumping, but he never regained full consciousness. Amara visited every day, sitting beside his bed, talking to him even though she didn't know if he could hear her. She told him about the diner, about the volunteers who'd helped repair it, about the customers who still believed in her despite the newspaper articles and gossip. She read to him from Emma's notebook the passages his late wife had written about kindness and community. Sometimes she just sat in silence, holding his weathered hand, wondering if he could feel her presence through whatever darkness held him. The doctors said his brain activity was stable, which meant there was hope. But they also warned that the longer he remained unconscious, the less likely he was to recover fully. Every day felt like borrowed time, and Amara treasured each moment she could spend with the man who'd changed her life simply by seeing her. On the fourth day, Walter's lawyer, Gerald Aldridge, arrived at the hospital carrying a leather briefcase. He found Amara in the hallway outside Walter's room, sitting in the uncomfortable plastic chair she'd claimed as her own. "Miss Lewis, I need to speak with you." Amara looked up, exhausted. "Is this about the competency hearing?" "In a way." Gerald sat down beside her. "Mr. Kensington gave me specific instructions before his collapse. He wanted me to read the first page of his revised will to you and certain other parties, regardless of his condition. I don't want to hear about money right now. I just wanted to wake up." "I understand." But Mr. Kensington was insistent. He said you needed to know his intentions before Elias could muddy the waters further. Within the hour, a small group gathered in a hospital conference room. Amara sat with Pastor Jonah on one side and Mrs. Harper on the other. Across the table, Elias sat with his attorney, his expression cold and triumphant. Gerald opened the sealed envelope and cleared his throat. "This is the opening statement of Walter Kensington's revised last will and testament, executed 4 days ago and properly witnessed. I'll read only the first page as instructed." Elias leaned forward, confident this would prove his father's incompetence. Gerald began reading. "I, Walter James Kensington, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. After careful consideration and with full awareness of my actions, I make the following declarations. My son, Elias Kensington, shall receive a trust fund valued at $5 million, with annual disbursements of $200,000. This is sufficient to maintain a comfortable lifestyle while ensuring he learns the value of work and restraint." Elias's face went white. $5 million? That's it? The estate is worth over $2 billion. Gerald continued, without acknowledging the interruption. "The majority of my estate shall be divided among charitable trusts, community development funds, and educational scholarships. However, I name Amara Lewis as the moral executor of the Kensington Foundation for Community Kindness, with decision-making authority over how funds are distributed." Gasps filled the room. Amara's hands trembled. "Additionally, Miss Lewis shall receive funding to establish and operate a community cafe with a mandate that meals be provided free of charge to any child in need. She will also receive funds to complete her sister's nursing education debt-free." Elias exploded. "This is insane. She manipulated him. We're challenging this immediately." His attorney placed a calming hand on his arm. "Mr. Kensington, let him finish." Gerald's expression remained neutral. Mr. Kensington anticipated challenges to this will. He therefore had himself evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists in the week before signing. All 3 certified him as mentally competent. Their reports are attached to the will. He also recorded a video statement explaining his reasoning, which will be played in full during probate. Elias stood up, his chair scraping harshly against the floor. "I don't care what some bot-and paid-for psychiatrists say. My father was vulnerable, sick, and this woman took advantage. We're going to court, and I'm going to prove she's nothing but a con artist who targeted a dying old man." He stormed out, his attorney following quickly behind. Amara sat in stunned silence. She looked at Pastor Jonah, who squeezed her hand gently. "I didn't ask for this," Amara whispered. "I never wanted his money. I know, child, but Walter wanted you to have it, not because of what you could do for him, but because of what you could do for others." Mrs. Harper wiped tears from her eyes. Your mama would be so proud. But Amara didn't feel proud. She felt crushed under the weight of responsibility and the target that had just been painted on her back. The next morning, the story exploded across national news. Billionaire names Waitress as foundation director in deathbed will change. The headlines were sensational, the coverage relentless. Television pundits debated whether Amara was a hero or a villain. Social media exploded with opinions from people who'd never met either Walter or Amara, but felt qualified to judge them both. Reporters showed up at the diner, at Amara's apartment, at the hospital, everywhere she went. They shouted questions, shoved microphones in her face, and followed her car. The harassment was constant and exhausting. Amara stopped going outside, except when absolutely necessary. The town split into bitter factions. Some celebrated Amara as a Cinderella story, proof that kindness could be rewarded in a cynical world. They organized support rallies and created social media pages defending her character. Others condemned her as a manipulator who'd preyed on a sick old man, calling for investigations and demanding she renounce the inheritance. The debate turned neighbors against neighbors, friends against friends. The diner became ground zero for arguments, with customers debating loudly over coffee about whether Amara deserved anything at all. Some left in protest when they saw her working. Others left extra-large tips as gestures of support. The atmosphere that had once been warm and welcoming turned tense and divided. Mrs. Harper tried to keep the peace, but even she felt the strain. Business suffered as people chose sides. Some regulars stopped coming entirely, unable to handle the constant conflict. The place that had been a sanctuary for the community became a battlefield, and it broke Amara's heart to see it. At the hospital, Amara sat beside Walter's bed, holding the small notebook that had belonged to Emma. Pastor Jonah had given it back to her, saying she might need the strength it contained. The worn leather cover felt like a lifeline, something solid to hold on to when everything else seemed to be crumbling. I don't know if I can do this, Amara said to Walter's unconscious form, her voice trembling with doubt and exhaustion. Everyone's watching, judging, assuming the worst. Your son is declaring war against everything valued. And you're here, unable to defend your own choices. The machines beeped steadily. No response came. If you can hear me, I need you to know something. I'm going to honor what you wanted. Not because of the money, but because you believed in me when nobody else did. You saw me, Walter. Really saw me. And that's worth more than any inheritance. She opened Emma's notebook and read a passage that had been underlined. The world tells us that value comes from what we own, but true value comes from what we give away. If someone remembers your kindness after you're gone, you've achieved immortality. Amara closed the notebook, tears streaming down her face. I won't let them erase what you try to do. I promise. That afternoon, Elias held a press conference outside his lawyer's office. Cameras flashed as he spoke into a cluster of microphones. My father was a great man who built an empire through hard work and integrity. In his final months, weakened by illness and isolated from family, he fell victim to a calculated scheme. This woman, Amara Lewis, systematically manipulated him, targeting his loneliness and exploiting his grief over my mother's death. A reporter called out, "Do you have proof of manipulation? We have photographs showing inappropriate closeness. We have evidence that she researched his wealth before deepening their relationship. We have testimony that she refused help publicly while accepting money privately. This is textbook manipulation of the elderly, and we will prove it in court." Another reporter shouted, "What about the psychiatric evaluations confirming your father's competency?" Elias's smile was thin. Those evaluations were conducted by doctors my father personally selected and paid. We're seeking an independent evaluation, which will show he was suffering from diminished capacity due to his heart condition and medication. The press conference painted Amara as a villain in a story millions would read. By evening, her face was on news websites across the country, accompanied by speculation and accusation. Naomi, who'd been discharged from the hospital the day before, found Amara sitting in their apartment with the lights off, staring at her phone. "You need to stop reading the comments," Naomi said gently. They think I'm a monster. They think I seduced a dying man for money. The people who know you know the truth. But the people who don't know me believe the lies. And there are millions more of them. Naomi sat beside her sister. So what are you going to do? Give up? Let Elias win? Let Walter's last wish get buried under accusations? I don't know how to fight this. I'm a waitress from a small town. He's a billionaire with lawyers and connections. You're not just a waitress. You're the woman Walter Kensington trusted with his legacy. That means something. Before Amara could respond, her phone rang. It was Pastor Jonah. Turn on the news. Channel 7. Right now, Amara grabbed the remote and switched on the television. A news anchor was introducing a segment. In a surprising twist to the Kensington controversy, we've obtained exclusive footage that may change the narrative. The screen cut to surveillance video from outside Harper's Diner. The timestamp showed it was from 3 weeks earlier. In grainy black and white, the footage showed Amara chasing a customer down the street in the rain, returning his wallet. The man tried to give her money as thanks, but she refused, pointing back to the diner with a smile. The anchor continued. This is just one of several videos provided anonymously to our station, showing Miss Lewis performing acts of kindness long before she met Walter Kensington. We also received testimony from over 50 town residents attesting to her character. Another video played. This one showed Amara at a grocery store, paying for an elderly woman's groceries when her card was declined. The elderly woman was crying with gratitude, and Amara hugged her. Pastor Jonah? Amara said into the phone, still watching the screen. It wasn't me, but I suspect I know who it was. Who? Walter. He must have arranged this before his collapse. He knew Elias would attack you, so he prepared a defense. Amara's chest tightened with emotion. Even unconscious in a hospital bed, Walter was still protecting her. The news segment ended with an interview with Mrs. Harper, who spoke with fierce conviction. I've known Amara Lewis since she was 16 years old. She's the most genuine person I've ever met. If Walter Kensington saw value in her, it's because he finally met someone who valued people over profit. Anyone saying otherwise doesn't know her at all. The public response shifted almost immediately. Social media filled with messages of support. People who'd been calling her a gold digger now apologized. The narrative was changing, and Elias's credibility was crumbling. But Elias wasn't finished. 2 nights later, Amara was jolted awake by pounding on her apartment door. She stumbled out of bed, confused and frightened. Through the peephole, she saw 2 police officers. Amara Lewis? One officer asked when she opened the door. Yes. You're under arrest for suspicion of arson and insurance fraud. What? I don't understand. The officer turned her around, pulling her hands behind her back. Harper's Diner burned down an hour ago. Evidence suggests you were involved. Naomi rushed out of her bedroom. This is insane. My sister hasn't left the apartment all night. She'll have a chance to explain at the station. They let Amara out in handcuffs while neighbors watched from doorways. The humiliation was crushing. As they drove through town, Amara saw the smoke still rising from where the diner had stood. Fire trucks surrounded the gutted building, their lights painting everything in shades of emergency. At the police station, Amara was photographed, fingerprinted, and placed in a holding cell. She sat on a metal bench, numb with shock. How had this happened? Why would anyone think she'd burned down the place that meant everything to her? Hours later, a detective came to interview her. Detective Carla Monroe was in her late 30s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She sat across from Amara in a small interrogation room. Miss Lewis, where were you between midnight and 2 in the morning? At home, asleep. My sister was there. Anyone else who can verify that? No, just Naomi. Detective Monroe slid a photograph across the table. It showed someone in a dark hoodie near the diner, holding what looked like a container. The person's face wasn't visible, but they had Amara's general build and height. This was captured by a security camera across the street. The timestamp shows 1:15 in the morning, approximately 30 minutes before the fire started. Amara stared at the photo. That's not me. We also found a steel cufflink at the scene. Do you recognize it? The detective showed her another photo. Amara's heart sank. It was the same cufflink she'd found after the previous break-in, the one with Elias's initials. I found that cufflink the first time the diner was vandalized. I gave it to someone. I don't remember who, but it wasn't mine. Someone is setting me up. That's a convenient story. It's the truth. Why would I burn down a place I love? Mrs. Harper is like family to me. Detective Monroe's expression didn't change. Financial motivation. The diner was insured. Mrs. Harper was struggling. Maybe you thought you were helping her collect insurance money. Or maybe you wanted to eliminate evidence of your relationship with Walter Kensington before the will challenge went to court. That's insane. I would never hurt Mrs. Harper. And I have nothing to hide about Walter. Then why were you caught on camera near the scene? I wasn't. That's not me. The interrogation continued for another hour. By the end, Amara was exhausted and terrified. They returned her to the holding cell, where she sat alone until morning. Pastor Jonah arrived with a bail bondsman. Within a few hours, Amara was released, but she had to surrender her passport and agree not to leave the county. Outside the station, reporters swarmed. Questions came from every direction. Did you start the fire? Are you trying to destroy evidence? Will you give back the inheritance? Pastor Jonah shielded Amara, guiding her to his car. They drove in silence until they were away from the chaos. I didn't do this, Amara said quietly. You believe me, don't you? Of course I believe you. But belief isn't enough. We need proof. At the hospital, Gerald Aldridge was waiting with news. He pulled Amara into a quiet corner. Elias has filed a motion to freeze all assets related to Walter's estate, citing your arrest as evidence of criminal intent and moral unfitness. The judge granted a temporary freeze until the investigation concludes, which means the cafe funding your sister's education money, even the community foundation, it's all frozen. Nothing moves until you're cleared. Amara felt the walls closing in. He planned this. Elias planned all of it. I suspect so, but proving it is another matter. That evening, Naomi found something while going through their mother's old photo albums. Tucked between pages was a receipt from a uniform supply store, dated the day before the fire. The receipt showed the purchase of a dark hoodie in Amara's size, paid for with cash. But the handwriting on the receipt didn't match Amara's. This doesn't make sense, Naomi said. Why would someone buy a hoodie to frame you? Because they needed something that looked like what I'd wear. Amara examined the receipt more closely. Wait, look at the store address. That's downtown, near Elias's hotel. They brought the receipt to Detective Monroe, who agreed to investigate. Within hours, she tracked down the store's security footage. The video showed a man in sunglasses and a baseball cap purchasing the hoodie. Though his face was partially obscured, his expensive watch and tailored jacket stood out. Monroe pulled up Elias's social media. In a photo from the same day, he wore the identical watch and jacket. This doesn't prove he started the fire, Monroe cautioned, but it does suggest someone was trying to make it look like your sister did. Can you bring him in for questioning? I'm working on it. But men like Elias Kensington don't come in for questioning easily. They send lawyers. Later that night, Monroe made a breakthrough. She'd been reviewing all the evidence from both the vandalism and the fire. The accelerant used in the fire matched a bulk order placed through a corporate account. She traced the account to a consulting firm that Elias's company had hired 3 weeks earlier. The consultant's name was Marcus Webb, and he had a record for fraud and intimidation. Monroe obtained a warrant and brought him in. Under pressure, Webb cracked. He admitted that Elias had hired him to create problems for Amara. The vandalism, the doctored photos showing Amara near the diner with lighter fluid, and finally the fire itself. Webb had worn the hoodie to match Amara's appearance and made sure he was caught on camera at an angle that obscured his face. Elias wanted her arrested and discredited, Webb told Monroe. He said if she was facing criminal charges, the will would be invalidated. He'd pay me $50,000 if I could make it happen. Monroe recorded every word. The next morning, Amara was at the hospital sitting with Walter when Detective Monroe arrived with news that would change everything. Miss Lewis, you're being cleared of all charges. We have a full confession from Marcus Webb implicating Elias Kensington in arson, fraud, and conspiracy. Amara's legs nearly gave out. It's over. The arson case against you is over. But now we're building a case against Elias. I'll need your full cooperation." Within hours, the news broke. Elias Kensington, CEO and heir to the Kensington fortune, was arrested at his hotel on multiple felony charges. The images of him being led away in handcuffs spread across every news outlet. At the hospital, Amara sat beside Walter and told him everything, even though he couldn't respond. "Your son is going to prison, Walter. I'm sorry. I know he's your child, and you love him. But he tried to destroy me. He tried to destroy everything you wanted to build." The machines continued their steady rhythm. But for just a moment, Amara thought she felt Walter's hand twitch in hers. "I'm going to make this right," she promised. "I'm going to use what you've given me to help people. Not because I want glory or recognition, but because that's what you taught me. That's what your Emma believed. And I won't let their legacy die." Outside the hospital room, Mrs. Harper arrived with surprising news. The insurance company had agreed to pay out the claim for the diner, and community donations had exceeded expectations. "We're going to rebuild," Mrs. Harper said, her eyes bright with tears. "And when we do, it's going to be better than ever." Pastor Jonas stood with them, looking through the window at Walter's still form. "He's fighting to stay," Jonas said quietly, "fighting to see his vision come true." Amara pressed her hand against the glass. "Then we better give him something worth waking up for." The war wasn't over. There would be court battles ahead, legal challenges, and years of work to fulfill Walter's dreams. But for the first time since this whole ordeal began, Amara felt like maybe, just maybe, she could do this. Because she wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had a community behind her. A lawyer who believed in Walter's vision. A detective who'd uncovered the truth. And most importantly, she had a promise to keep. The promise she'd made to a dying billionaire who'd bet everything on the radical idea that kindness still mattered in a world obsessed with wealth. And Amara Lewis never broke her promises. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Journalists lined the back wall, cameras banned, but notebooks ready. Town residents filled every available seat, some supporting Amara, others still skeptical despite Elias's arrest. The air hummed with anticipation as Judge Patricia Hammond took her bench. This wasn't a criminal trial for Amara anymore. Those charges had been dropped. This was the probate hearing for Walter's will, with Elias challenging it from jail through his legal team. His lawyers argued that even with psychiatric evaluations, Walter had been under undue influence during a vulnerable time. Amara sat at the plaintiff's table with Gerald Aldridge. She wore a simple navy dress, her hands folded in her lap. Across the aisle, Elias's attorney, Richard Sterling, shuffled papers with practiced confidence. Judge Hammond addressed the court. "We're here to determine the validity of Walter Kensington's revised will. Mr. Sterling, you may call your first witness." Sterling stood. "Your Honor, I call Dr. Benjamin Walsh, cardiac specialist." Dr. Walsh took the stand, an older man with wire-rimmed glasses. Sterling walked him through Walter's medical history, emphasizing the heart condition, the medications, the declining health. "Dr. Walsh, in your professional opinion, could these medications have affected Mr. Kensington's judgment?" "The medications he was taking can cause confusion in some patients, yes." "Could they impair decision-making ability?" "Potentially, though not in every case." Gerald stood for cross-examination. "Dr. Walsh, did you ever personally treat Mr. Kensington?" "No. I'm reviewing his medical records." "So you never observed his mental state firsthand?" "That's correct. And the 3 psychiatrists who did evaluate him face-to-face all certified him as competent, didn't they?" Dr. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "According to the documents, yes." "Thank you. No further questions." Sterling called several more witnesses. A former business associate who claimed Walter had grown paranoid in his final months. A housekeeper who said he talked to himself. Each testimony painted Walter as a confused old man, easily manipulated. But Gerald was ready. "Your Honor, I'd like to play the video statement Mr. Kensington recorded specifically for these proceedings." The courtroom lights dimmed. A screen lowered, and Walter's face appeared, filmed just days before his collapse. He sat in a law office, clear-eyed and composed. "My name is Walter James Kensington," his recorded voice began. I'm making this statement because I know my son Elias will challenge my will. I want the court to understand that I am of sound mind, that no one has coerced me, and that my decisions are mine alone. The courtroom fell silent. Even the journalists stopped writing. For 3 years after my wife Emma died, I searched for something I thought had disappeared from the world. Genuine kindness. The kind that expects nothing in return. I traveled across 12 states, leaving tips, watching how people responded when they thought no one was looking. Most failed the test, but Amara Lewis, a waitress in a small-town diner, passed every single time. Walter's voice grew stronger. She gave away money she desperately needed. She chased people down to return lost wallets. She stayed late to clean a struggling diner without being asked. She did these things not for recognition or reward, but because that's who she is. When I tried to help her, she refused, saying I should help people like her, not her specifically. She has more dignity in poverty than my son has ever shown in wealth. Several people in the courtroom wiped their eyes. I'm leaving my fortune to programs that will help communities, feed children, and provide education. I'm naming Amara as moral executor not because she manipulated me, but because she's the only person I trust to make decisions based on need rather than greed. My son Elias has proven repeatedly that he values money over people. I'm giving him enough to live comfortably because he's my child and I love him. But I will not give him the power to undo the good this fortune can do. Walter looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, it means I'm either gone or unable to speak for myself. Don't let anyone tell you I didn't know what I was doing. I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Emma would be proud of this choice, and that's all the validation I need. The video ended. The courtroom remained quiet for a long moment. Judge Hammond cleared her throat. "Mr. Sterling, do you have any response?" Sterling stood, but his confidence had evaporated. "Your Honor, we maintain that emotional manipulation can still occur even with good intentions. Do you have any evidence of manipulation beyond speculation?" "We have the photographs showing excessive familiarity between Miss Lewis and Mr. Kensington." Gerald stood. "Those same photographs show two people having coffee and conversation. Is it manipulation when someone treats a lonely person with kindness? Is it undue influence when someone listens?" Judge Hammond made a note. "I'd like to hear from Miss Lewis herself. Miss Lewis, please take the stand." Amara's legs felt shaky as she walked to the witness box. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Gerald approached gently. "Miss Lewis, when you first met Walter Kensington, did you know who he was?" "No. He looked like a regular customer. Worn jacket, old truck. Nothing suggested he had money." "When did you learn his true identity?" "About 2 weeks after we met. I looked up Kensington Industries after he mentioned helping with community funds. That's when I saw his photo online." "What was your reaction?" "I was angry. I felt like he'd been testing me, like I was some kind of experiment. I asked him to stay away from the diner." "But you reconciled." "Why?" Amara's voice was steady. "Because I realized he wasn't testing me to prove I was bad. He was testing the world to see if goodness still existed. And after his wife died, after years of people only caring about his wealth, he needed to believe kindness was real. I understood that loneliness. I'd felt it too after losing my mother." "Did Mr. Kensington ever promise you money?" "Never. Not once. He talked about Emma, about regrets, about wanting to make his last months matter. We were friends. That's all." "When you learned about the will, what did you think?" Amara's eyes filled with tears. "I thought it was too much. I didn't deserve it. I still don't think I deserve it. But Walter believed I could honor his vision, and I promised him I would. Not because of the money, but because he saw something in me that I hadn't seen in myself." Sterling stood for cross-examination. "Miss Lewis, isn't it true you were in significant debt when you met Mr. Kensington?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that debt gave you motivation to befriend a wealthy man?" "I've been in debt my whole adult life. I've served hundreds of wealthy customers over the years. I never befriended any of them hoping for money. But you accepted his help with your sister's medical bills. Only after he arranged it anonymously through hospital charity. When I found out, I confronted him about it. I didn't want his money. I wanted his respect." Sterling's questions continued, but Amara answered each one with quiet honesty. She didn't defend herself with elaborate explanations. She simply told the truth. When she stepped down, Pastor Jonah was called to testify. He spoke about knowing Emma Kensington, about recognizing Walter's loneliness, about watching Amara serve the community with grace for years. Amara Lewis is exactly who Walter thought she was, Jonah said firmly. Kind, honest, and more concerned with others than herself. If that makes her a manipulator, then we need more manipulators in this world. The courtroom erupted in applause. Judge Hammond gavelled for order. Mrs. Harper testified next, bringing a shoebox full of receipts. These are every tip Amara put into our community jar over the past 2 years. $3,462. Money she needed, but gave away anyway. Does that sound like someone chasing a fortune? Even Sterling seemed at a loss. The hearing stretched into a second day. More witnesses testified on Amara's behalf. Regular customers. Naomi, speaking about her sister's sacrifices. Detective Monroe, explaining how Elias had orchestrated the fire to frame Amara. Finally, Judge Hammond called for closing arguments. Sterling stood first. Your Honor, we don't dispute Miss Lewis's kindness. We question whether that kindness was calculated. Mr. Kensington was vulnerable, dying, and desperate for connection. Miss Lewis provided that connection at precisely the right time. The timing alone suggests opportunism. Gerald stood for rebuttal. Your Honor, the prosecution wants us to believe that showing kindness to a lonely person is manipulation, that being a good human being is somehow suspicious. Walter Kensington was many things, brilliant, wealthy, flawed. But he was not a fool. 3 psychiatrists confirmed his competency. His own video statement confirms his reasoning. And most importantly, his choice reflects values his late wife held dear. Values that Amara Lewis embodies naturally. Gerald turned to face the courtroom. This case isn't about whether Amara deserves wealth. It's about whether we honor a dying man's final wishes or let his son's bitterness override his father's legacy. Walter Kensington wanted to leave the world better than he found it. He chose someone who would use resources to help others, not enrich herself. That's not manipulation. That's wisdom. Judge Hammond adjourned to consider her ruling. 3 hours later, everyone reconvened. The judge's expression was unreadable as she took her seat. I've reviewed all testimony, evidence, and documentation. While I understand the concerns raised about undue influence, I find no credible evidence that Miss Lewis manipulated Mr. Kensington. The psychiatric evaluations are thorough and independent. The video statement is clear and compelling. And most significantly, the pattern of Miss Lewis's behavior predates her knowledge of Mr. Kensington's wealth. Amara's heart pounded. Furthermore, Elias Kensington's own criminal actions, including conspiracy to commit arson and fraud, demonstrate exactly why his father had concerns about his judgment. This court validates Walter Kensington's revised will in its entirety. Miss Lewis will serve as moral executor of the foundation, and all distributions will proceed as outlined. The gavel struck. The courtroom erupted. Supporters cheered. Even some skeptics nodded approval. But Amara didn't feel victorious. She felt the crushing weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. As she left the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Questions flew from every direction. Gerald guided her to a waiting car, but Amara stopped. I want to say something. The crowd quieted. Cameras focused on her face. Walter Kensington was a good man who made mistakes, like we all do. But in his final months, he tried to do something meaningful. He believed kindness still mattered in a world that often forgets. I'm going to honor that belief. Every decision I make with this foundation will ask one question. Would this make Walter and Emma proud? Would this help someone who needs it? If the answer is yes, then we move forward. If it's no, we don't. That's my promise. She got in the car as the crowd applauded. But before returning to the hospital to tell Walter the news, Amara got a call that shattered everything. Walter had taken a turn for the worse. Amara ran through the hospital corridors, Pastor Jonah and Naomi close behind. The ICU nurse met them outside Walter's room, her expression grave. His vitals are dropping. The doctors are doing everything they can, but She didn't need to finish. Through the window, Amara saw doctors working frantically. Machines beeped urgently. Then, slowly, the activity stopped. The doctors stepped back. One of them checked the time and made a note. Amara's knees buckled. Pastor Jonah caught her, holding her as she sobbed. No, not now. Not when she'd finally won. Not when she could tell him it was over, that his wishes would be honored. The doctor came out, removing his gloves. I'm sorry. His heart gave out. We tried everything. Can I see him? Of course. Take as much time as you need. Amara walked into the room on trembling legs. The machines were silent now. Walter looked peaceful, his weathered face finally free of pain. She took his still warm hand and pressed it to her cheek. We won, Walter. The judge validated your will. Everything you wanted, it's going to happen. I'm going to make sure of it. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry you couldn't hear the verdict. I'm so sorry you fought so hard and didn't get to see what comes next. She stayed there for an hour, saying goodbye to the man who'd changed her life with $5 tips and quiet observations. The man who'd believed in her when the world told her she was worthless. The man who'd proven that wealth measured in dollars meant nothing compared to wealth measured in kindness. When she finally left, Gerald was waiting in the hallway with documents. There's more, he said gently. Walter left specific instructions for after his death. He wanted you to have this immediately. He handed her a sealed envelope with her name written in Walter's shaky handwriting. Inside was a letter and a small metal object. Amara unfolded the letter with trembling hands. Dear Amara, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. I hope I got to see you win in court, but if not, know that I never doubted you would. You have Emma's strength, her goodness, and her absolute refusal to let the world make you hard. The harmonica enclosed belonged to Emma. She used to play it when she was thinking, said it helped her hear her own heart. I want you to have it. When the foundation work gets hard, when people question you, when you doubt yourself, hold this and remember, you're doing exactly what Emma would have wanted. You're proving that kindness isn't weakness, it's revolution. Don't cry for me. I got something in my final months that money could never buy. I got to believe in humanity again. That's your gift to me, and I'll carry it wherever I'm going next. Take care of yourself, Amara. Take care of your sister. And most importantly, take care of all those children who need someone to believe in them the way you believed in me. With love and gratitude, Walter. P.S. The $5 bill in the envelope. That was the first one you gave away. I kept it all this time. Frame it. Remember where this all started. Amara pulled out the crumpled $5 bill, tears streaming down her face. She held Emma's harmonica, feeling the weight of legacy in her palms. The funeral happened 3 days later. Hundreds attended, from business executives to diner customers. Elias was brought from jail in handcuffs to pay his respects, his face hollow with regret and anger. He didn't speak to anyone, just stood apart, alone. Amara gave the eulogy. She spoke about Walter's journey from grief to hope, about his determination to find goodness in a cynical world, about his love for Emma, and how it shaped his final choices. Walter Kensington taught me that the most valuable thing we can give is our belief in someone else, Amara said, her voice carrying across the crowded chapel. He believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself. Now it's my turn to believe in others. That's how legacies grow, not through money passed down, but through kindness passed forward. As they lowered Walter's casket into the ground beside Emma's, Pastor Jonah read from the notebook, "If ever you find someone kind, give them what money could not, belief." Months passed. The foundation took shape. Amara worked with Gerald to identify struggling communities, schools without lunch programs, families drowning in medical debt. The cafe opened on a bright spring morning. The sign above the door read, "Emma's Table, Pay with Kindness." Inside, yellow walls glowed warmly. A corner filled with books and board games invited children to stay. The first customer was a shy boy about 10 years old, wearing clothes too small for his frame. Amara smiled and waved him in. "Come on in. What can I get you?" "I don't have money," he whispered. "That's okay. At Emma's Table, kindness is the only currency we accept. You hungry?" He nodded. "How about a grilled cheese sandwich and tomato soup?" His eyes widened. Really? Really? Go pick a table. As the boy settled in with his homework, other children began arriving. Some with lunch money, some without. It didn't matter. Everyone ate. Mrs. Harper helped in the kitchen, her rebuilt diner next door flourishing once again. Naomi graduated from nursing school debt-free and took a job at the local hospital. She volunteered at the cafe twice a week. The Kensington Foundation funded 20 other cafes in struggling towns. Each one followed the same model. Pay with kindness. Never turn away a hungry child. One afternoon, 6 months after Walter's death, elderly factory workers arrived carrying a wooden box. "We worked at Kensington's factory 30 years ago," their spokesperson said. "Walter saved our jobs when the company almost closed. Never told anyone. Just quietly restructured so we could keep working. We heard what you're doing. Walter always wanted to help kids. Said they deserved better than we got. So we took up a collection. It's not much, but we want to contribute." They opened the box. Inside were small donations from dozens of workers. Ones and fives and tens, carefully collected and bundled. In total, about $800. Amara's eyes filled with tears. "This is everything. Thank you." "No, ma'am. Thank you for proving that Walter's kindness didn't die with him." That evening, Amara stood in the empty cafe, looking at the framed $5 bill on the wall. The plaque beneath read, "It started with $5, but it was never about money." She pulled Emma's harmonica from her pocket and played a single note. She looked at the photos on the wall, Walter and Emma young and laughing. Children eating at Emma's table. Detective Monroe stopped by. "You did good, Amara. We did good. All of us together." Pastor Jonah arrived with news. Elias had been sentenced to 5 years. He'd requested that Amara visit him in prison. She went the next day. Elias sat across from her, looking years older. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said quietly. "But I wanted you to know that I finally watched my father's video statement. Really watched it. What's that? He loved me. Even when disappointed, he still loved me. He just loved humanity more." Elias's voice cracked. "You gave him something I never could. Hope." Amara wasn't ready to forgive him, but she understood that pain could change people, just like kindness could. "Your father believed people could change," Amara said finally. "Maybe you can too." She left the prison with a lighter heart. She had Walter's belief, Emma's legacy, and a community that had rallied around kindness. That night, Amara sat in her apartment and wrote in a journal she'd started keeping. She wrote about the children fed, the families helped, the communities strengthened. She wrote about Walter and Emma, about her mother and the values passed down through generations of women who understood that true wealth wasn't found in bank accounts. The final entry for that night read, "Today a child asked me why the cafe is free. I told him because someone once believed that kindness was more valuable than money. He asked if that person was rich. I said yes, but not because of his bank account. He was rich because he chose to see goodness in others. That's the kind of wealth I want to build. The kind you can't deposit or withdraw. The kind that multiplies every time it's given away." Years later, Emma's table would become a national model for community kindness. Hundreds of cities would eventually adopt the pay with kindness approach. Thousands of children would eat meals they couldn't afford. And every single location would have the same plaque. It started with $5, but it was never about money. Amara Lewis, once a waitress working double shifts to survive, became one of the most influential philanthropists in America. Not because she was wealthy, but because she understood something most people forgot. True wealth isn't measured in what you have. It's measured in what you give away. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Walter and Emma Kensington smiled. Because the test had finally been passed. Not by one person, but by an entire movement of people choosing kindness over cynicism. It started with a $5 tip in a small-town diner, but it became a revolution of love that would echo through generations. And Amara Lewis, true to her promise, never stopped giving. Not ever. If someone tested your kindness when you had nothing left to give, would you pass or would you protect yourself first? Like and subscribe for more stories that challenge what we think we know about human nature.